Hello, and welcome to this latest episode of the Living with and Beyond Cancer podcast. My name is Steve Poynton of Steve Poynton Counselling and Support. This is a podcast for people who have or have had cancer. As a twice diagnosed kidney cancer patient who has been in remission for 7.5 years, I recognise the trials and tribulations of what happens next once we've finished treatment or are on long-term maintenance treatment and try and return to our lives. But before we get on to today's episode, if you want to know more about myself and why I'm doing this podcast, please go back to episode 1, released on World Cancer Day on the 4th of February 2026. Welcome to this latest episode, where we'll be exploring the story of Richard Barker. But before we start and hear from Richard, I'd just like to say a few words about a sponsor of the show, Corporate Wellbeing Solutions. If you're a business owner or managing a team, it's worth checking out Corporate Wellbeing Solutions. They specialise in occupational health support, providing high-quality practical reports with a really fast turnaround, so you're not left waiting when you've got a live employee situation to deal with. They also offer an employee assistance programme, giving your staff access to qualified counsellors, along with mental health and wellbeing support whenever it's needed. If you want straightforward, reliable support that actually helps you manage your peoples properly, please have a look at Corporate Wellbeing Solutions and email them on occhealth@corporatewellbeingsolutions.com. So, welcome to Richard. Would you like to introduce yourself, where you're from, what you do, etc., etc.?
Yeah, I can do. Thanks for having me on, Steve. My name's Richard Barker, 54 years old. I'm married to Angela. I've got 2 children, Jake, he's 23, and Eloise, who's 15. I live in West Yorkshire, Castleford. And yeah, cancer's been in my life for a long, long time, but we'll get on to that in a bit, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just worth pointing out, I got to know Richard through Action Kidney Cancer. And that obviously gives away what Richard's cancer is, but we'll come on to that. But Richard's been a great support to me and just through messages on and off the online forum. Yeah, it's great to have sort of, I wouldn't say allies in the camp, but somebody you've known for a long time on there, isn't it? Familiar faces is really good at
Yeah,
times.
yeah. It's always really, well, that particular forum's a fabulous forum for support for people with kidney
Yeah,
cancer. Amazing.
I'm sure we'll come on to the type of support as we go through this.
Mhm.
So your journey with cancer, Richard, started in 2013. Do you want to tell us what happened?
Yeah, so in 2013, my dad was diagnosed with kidney cancer unexpectedly. He had an admission for what we thought was colitis and went into hospital for some checks. And during some routine scans, they found a kidney tumour. Unfortunately, it had metastasised and he was given a terminal diagnosis immediately. He was 65 years old, um, and that kind of shook the family somewhat. Very unexpected. Up to that point, he'd not really ever been poorly. He was just one of those blokes, I guess, who never get ill, and it was just a huge, huge shock.
Yeah, that feels like that came out of the blue, and that's the thing with kidney cancer, isn't it? I know he had some symptoms that must have prompted the scan about looking for colitis, suspected colitis. But the thing with kidney cancer, it's so often heard, isn't it, that it's found when they're looking potentially for something else.
Yeah, it's just one of those hidden cancers, isn't it, that often presents itself very late and often too late. In my dad's case, he'd actually nursed his own mum through cancer back when I was like a teenager. I think she had lung cancer, and so he'd experienced that, and he'd also experienced a few other family members who'd had cancer too. So it's been pretty prevalent all the way through my life, really. And I think because of the experience that he'd had with his mum nursing her through her journey, unfortunately she passed away. He was very what he wanted to do. He never really talked too much about having cancer, what the impact were going to be, anything like that. He just wanted to just get on with life, whatever he got left, I think. So he decided, on some advice from the consultants, just to take quality over quantity. He decided not to have any surgery or treatments, and they put him on a watch and wait. And that went on for probably about maybe 18 months, something like that, and he was under St James's um, from the summer of 2013, and that just consisted of going for regular scans and checkups and things, and I was taking him to those, and we just really got on uh, as a normal family would. Really, it was
Mm.
never really a massive part of conversation or anything. He just did what he did, went out to work. He was self-employed. He had his own business, and things remained stable, and everything was okay until probably summer of 2014, and then things started to change. We had a holiday home on the east coast in Scarborough, and I remember going over with him and my mum, and we were walking back up quite a steep hill, and he struggled a lot with his breathing, and I knew he was slowing down. And then probably around October that year, it got to a state where we went. I think we went for a check, and they found that his things had changed. So the tumours and things had started to shift and move and grow, and um, they found a, a met on his hip, and he was having a lot of leg pain and hip pain. So they suggested that he needed to probably start some treatment at that point, and I think he thought he needed it then. So that's when things started to happen, and they put him on, some drugs, and he had a bit of radiotherapy and things. By that point, he was really struggling. He'd lost a lot of weight, and he ended up closing his business. And there was a rapid decline after that. He had a hospital admission in December, and then he was only in hospital for probably a couple of days. And he got an infection and sepsis. The inevitable happened, and he passed away, unfortunately. But the journey was, I think, as he expected, and I think more or less as he wanted. He went quite quickly in the end, and not in a lot of pain. They looked after him incredibly well in the hospital, and the family. We were well looked after at that stage. Yeah, that was like the introduction to kidney cancer, and watching and caring for him, through
So
his journey.
it feels like listening to you there, you played quite an active role in sort of caring for him, taking him to and from. And I guess at that time, doing my maths of how old you said your children are now, they were reasonably young,
Yeah, there
watching
were. Yeah,
dad care for granddad.
yeah.
How did you cope through that? What was life like for you as a sort of child? Well, no, you weren't a child, but as a
Well,
carer for your dad?
it was really tough. I kind of throw myself into things and just try and get on with stuff. So I had a few hobbies at the time. So I was like playing in brass bands and doing all sorts of music stuff. And I'd recently started doing some car restoration with a really close friend of my dad's, Graham. My dad had had an old Cortina stuck in a garage for years, and we decided we were going to restore it and do it for Dad's retirement, because he was getting to that age where he was going to close his business probably and retire. So we started doing the restoration, and yeah, just threw myself into stuff like that. Tried to do the best that I could to support Dad and take, like you say, taking him to his appointments and everything, and going and interpreting what the medics were saying. It wasn't always comfortable in hospital settings, but because of my background and role, I've been in health and social care since 1993, I think it was, when I joined the Department of Health. I'm used to speaking regularly with medics, and I understand terminology, and I know what they're trying to say roughly. So having me alongside, I think, probably helped him on that
Mm.
journey.
So I am aware that 2014 is obviously a tough year because you've lost your dad. I
Yeah.
know from getting to know you a little bit, that wasn't the only experience with cancer around that time. What
No,
happened?
sadly not. Um, so before Dad's diagnosis, my best friend was diagnosed with bowel cancer at probably the end of 2013, I think it was. Oh, yeah, it was the end of 2013. And unfortunately, after a really short um, battle, within 3 months, he died and passed away. And at the same time, my sister in law, Leanne, had been diagnosed with a brain tumour. a glioblastoma. So she was undergoing a lot of treatment at that point as well. And Dad saw that happening. That must have been really tough for him watching them. And he attended Jonathan's funeral as well. So I can't even imagine how he felt at that point, knowing that that was likely to be coming at some point for him. But he never really spoke or addressed those fears with anyone. He was very stoic, and even after attending the funerals, he said very little and managed his own journey in the way that he did it. He just, he did make it clear at one point that he didn't want to die in hospital. And he wanted to be at home, because when everything took a little bit of a turn in December of 2014, when he started to really get poorly, um, we had a GP visit and after a bank holiday, and he'd been poorly all bank holiday, very poorly, and I turned up and he was really ill, and the GP just said to him, "Look, Roy, we need you to really consider going into a hospital where we can care better for you." So at that point, he consented and we went into hospital, and it's probably, in hindsight, it was a wise decision. It could be, obviously, we didn't understand what were going on at the time, and he had sepsis, and that needed to be dealt with.
I mean, wow, there's a lot there, isn't there, in a short space of time? So your friend,
Yeah,
your dad, your
yeah,
sister-in-law, and I think
yeah.
your grandmother passed away similar sort of time-ish. What
Yes.
support did you have, Richard? What sort of help did you have? I know you've got a good family, but there's a
Yeah,
lot going on there for you.
yeah, it was a mixed bag, really. I've got a really good close network of friends and family, and they were absolutely amazing. At the time, I was working, at Department of Health, and they had a great referral scheme, and I ended up going to see a counsellor, and that was invaluable for keeping me sane. Um, it was just a very tough time, really hard to navigate, you know. I think even when you've just got one death to deal with, it's hard, but
Oh,
having three or
absolutely.
four in the space of 18 months, I just didn't know way was up or down some days. It
Well,
was really.
you're dead right what
uh,
you said there, Richard. As somebody who is a grief counsellor, I work a lot with bereavement. One passing away is significant for a lot of people to deal with. To go into multiple in a very short space of time, that is something really difficult to work with. And I'm really pleased to hear you were offered some counselling through work, because it is something that seems to be getting more accessible for a lot of the bigger organisations for counselling to
Yeah.
be available. And of course, I was talking on the introduction to the show about Corporate Wellbeing Solutions, a sponsor of the show, where they offer employees counselling, and it's so important, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a lifeline for me, and it made me really understand that I needed to do something for myself, I think, just to try to have something to concentrate on. So, I said earlier, one of the things that I was doing at the time was, like, doing a car restoration. It was gonna be for my dad, and unfortunately, when he passed away in December, the car wasn't finished. So I made a plan in my head, didn't tell anyone. But when we finished the car restoration, I decided we were going to take a bit of a road trip and do some fundraising for Yorkshire Cancer Centre at St James's, much to the dismay of friends who I roped into coming along with me. And we ended up driving all the way to Cortina d'Ampezzo in the Italian Dolomites.
Wow.
We went there and back, and we returned. I think it was on what would have been my dad's birthday, on the 4th of August. It was a summer trip. My twin brother, Chris, came along with me, and we postponed it until then because he's a teacher. So we went in the summer, and we took our two boys, Evan, my nephew, and Jake, my son. And Mark, my cousin, came along. He was very close to my dad. He lost his mum to breast cancer when he was only a teenager, and my dad was kind of a key part in his life, really. And we had an amazing trip, just fantastic. And our boys talk about it now. They're older. They've both passed the test. And we joke and say we ought to go back again and they can do the driving. It was like 2,500 miles there and back. And it was just amazing. It's just, yeah, fantastic um, experience. And we raised I think it was about £7,000, something like that. So it was really worthwhile.
I mean, that sounds like a wonderful experience, especially to have your brother and your son
It
and your
was.
nephew. I
Yeah.
would imagine pretty bittersweet as well, as it was the vehicle was supposed to be for dad.
Yeah, it was a little bit bittersweet, but, he would have loved it, and I think he would have been very proud of what we did, to be honest, in the
Mm.
end. It was a bit of an odd, situation as well because my son wasn't very well on the journey, and then when we came back, we understood why about a month later, and he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, so it was a bit,
Wow.
you know, it wasn't without its challenge, shall we say. And also on that journey, in that journey, should I say, I started to experience a bit of odd things happening and put them down to a bit of stress because of everything that had been going on and, maybe a bit of illness caused by something that I'd eaten. I'd had a few things where I'd had nausea and I was like vomiting and things like that a couple of times. Put it down to food poisoning and other funny symptoms, but never really thought anything about it. Just dismissed it.
Okay. So going through all of that, how did that affect work and things like that? Because I heard they gave you a good employee assistance program or access to counseling.
Yeah,
I guess at that stage, after going through so much grief, you start to evaluate your own life and where you're going.
absolutely. Yeah. Um, so at that moment in time, organization itself was going through a big restructure. And I started to take leave of myself and thought, well, what do I want out of life? I've been there nearly 25 years, I think, and I was kind of thinking, do I really want to do this? My health wasn't in a good place at that moment in time. I was struggling with lots of things and then just unexplained things like just feeling ill, back pain, fatigue. But because I spent a lot of time sat down in an office chair and not very active, I put it down to the job and I thought, well, maybe it's time I did something different. So I decided to apply for redundancy and leave and then reevaluate things and look to set up my own business and, get out of the rat race, I guess. So I was accepted for redundancy and I left in January 2017. Happy that I'd made the right choice, uh, but it didn't quite work out how I expected it to. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
I ended up not very well, and my symptoms just started to get worse. I was going to the toilet regularly, lots and lots of back pain, abdominal pain, waking through the night. I got night sweats and all sorts of things, and I knew something wasn't quite right. Convinced myself that it'd go away for a little bit, and then thought, maybe this is something that needs to start being investigated. At that point, I was hiding a lot of it from my family. I stayed in like, I had my own bedroom. I did snore terribly. That's now sorted out because I got put on CPAP for sleep apnea, much to the hilarity of my wife. I think she misses the snoring really, but so when I was getting up through the night going to the toilet, nobody knew. I was, vomiting in the night, and people just didn't realize what were happening in my family anyway. So I went to the doctors and they did some kind of minor tests, blood tests and things like that. Everything came back okay. But in between appointments, I was still unwell. And the doctor at the second appointment weighed me to see what my weight was and noticed that I'd lost quite a bit of weight. Um, I've always been quite a big lad and I weighed probably 22 stone, something like that. And by the time I got diagnosed with the kidney cancer in August of that year, I'd lost probably about 4 stone. So the blood tests and things that were clear at the doctors, um, I knew in my heart of hearts that something wasn't right and pushed and pushed and pushed and managed to get a referral on a 12-week cancer check. I didn't think I got cancer, and neither did the doctor. But he sent me to hospital anyway, just to get some checks, just to be sure. And I had some blood tests at the hospital. They were all clear. But the cancer nurse who sat down with me on that day when I went in sat and listened to what was happening and all my symptoms and just said, something just isn't ringing true. You've got no markers, there's nothing happening, but I really do think there's something not quite right. And I shouldn't be doing it, but would you go for an MRI scan? And I said, yeah. And they scanned me and I went away. A couple of days later, I was driving down the road and I got a phone call from the hospital. And it popped onto my phone as the diabetes clinic because my son, obviously, I've been taking him regularly for his type 1 diabetic appointments. And I thought it was them, and it wasn't. It was the oncology department. And they asked me to go in the following day. They got the results of the MRI scan and asked me to come in urgently to see the consultant. And those few words, "Can you fetch somebody with you, please?" And I knew right away what that meant.
There is so many things, isn't there, in the cancer world that you get to learn what they mean, and you were
Yeah,
talking about certain things before, weren't you, through work, but can you come in and bring somebody with you? They're never
yeah.
ringing to say, "We got some good news, let's come and have a celebration." That's not good news, is it, when you get that call?
No, no. Um, I tried not to panic, and I went home and told my wife and said, "Look, we need to go into hospital tomorrow." So we did. Dropped the kids off as normal. They went to school, and we went off to the hospital. Uh, I remember sitting in the um, waiting room, and consultant came out of his room and walked up towards us and said, "Can Mr. Barker, do you want to come in and have a conversation?" So in we went, and there were no messing around. He just said, "Look, I'm sorry to tell you, but you've got a growth on your kidney." And I think I blurted out at that moment, "Not again." And he looked a bit confused, and he was like, "Have you had a kidney tumor before?" I was like, "No," but my dad had one. And then we ended up getting into the conversation, and I find out that my kidney tumor's 10 times the size my dad's was. So my immediate thought was, "Well, that's it. I'm done for."
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I was just numb, devastated. And the thought of, you know, I didn't really know what was happening, but instantly your mind takes you to that place of, oh God, what about my wife and my kids? And everything's just 100 miles an hour going around your brain. And,
Your
you know,
your own
even that,
experience
even
of
that doesn't leave me now sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, even your experience of cancer over the previous few years, let alone kidney cancer with your dad,
Yeah.
was all negative. So I can't imagine
Yeah.
how you felt at that time. And I know you just said the fear of you losing leaving your wife and your kids, but that must
Mm,
have been debilitating for you with all of that recent experience. And before
it
you answer
was.
that, I guess even leading up to that, going through all those sort of symptoms, the night vomits that nobody knows about, was there somewhere inside of you that was thinking, this is not good and I know where this is leading? Or at what point did you start to think there's a problem
Uh,
here?
the problem where I was losing half a stone every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I think, nearly. I was kidding myself, I think, thinking, "Oh, this isn't serious. It'll be something and nothing." I think that's the kind of irrational me. I've my glass is normally pretty full, and I try to look on the bright side, but I've not really I'd not really thought it could be anything that serious until that point. And yes, I did panic, and for good reason. After what happened to my dad, everything just came flooding back. But also, only a couple of months before that, I'd heard that one of my school friends had been diagnosed with kidney cancer, and he died within like 12 weeks of his, um, you know, his diagnosis. So it was just all just too much. It just got to my head just couldn't take it. I was just like, I didn't know which way was up and down. It took a long time to process and to get into the mindset of, right, we're going to get through this. It'll be fine. Maybe a week or two. And it took me a couple of weeks to really get on top of it. It really hit me hard, you know. But my wife was really, really supportive and fantastic, and so were my family, my twin
Mm.
brother and my mum, everybody, everybody around really tried to kind of, G me up and keep me going. So we were just kind of in a position. It was a waiting position, really, of what were going to come next after that initial meeting.
Okay,
Um,
so your dad's refused surgery. I know, obviously, from experience, kidney cancer can be treated if it's contained with surgery. Is
mm.
that what you were offered?
Yeah, I was very lucky. Although the tumor was massive, it was 10.5 centimeters. There wasn't any metastasis, which was I knew was fantastic. So in my mind, after that initial couple of weeks worrying about things, it was like, right, what are we doing? Because this thing just needs to come out, and I just need to get on with the rest of my life. So I had a conversation with a consultant, and they made it really clear that they wanted the operation to happen quickly, and they said within 12 weeks. So excuse me, waiting for a date, and I did get a date within 12 weeks. And then a week before the operation, I got a letter to say they couldn't do it and it wouldn't be happening as scheduled. And obviously, then I was I'd already made my mind up it was happening, and I kind of hit that wall, devastated, and just didn't know what to do. My wife took over at that point, and she went into kind of action mode, and she was like, "We're not having this. This is ridiculous. It's really important that you get it done." And so she contacted pals, and we ended up going through them a bit of toing and froing. And anyway, culminated in what was only a week's delay rather than months. I went for the operation in September, uh, and had a nephrectomy. And they took out the tumor and the kidney and the adrenal gland and all the other bits and pieces. It was quite a major operation, and thank goodness, Angela jumped into action, because it could have been a very different outcome, I think, if we'd have had the delay. Because when I got the results, there were already signs that, things were travelling a little bit. It hadn't gone anywhere major, but they knew that, that there was a bit of movement, so I was very relieved when the operation happened.
So, for those that don't know, nephrectomy is removal of your kidney. You had a full nephrectomy, I
Yeah,
assume, with a 10.5 centimeter tumor, yeah, so the whole kidney removed.
yeah.
Recovery is usually around about 6 weeks-ish. How did that recovery go for you?
Yeah, really tough to begin with. It wasn't a great experience. The operation went brilliantly, amazing, but the aftercare in the hospital, I think I was sent home after 2 nights in the hospital without any pain relief or anything like that. Very unusual, and I know that wouldn't normally happen, but that made my recovery very difficult. It was, yeah, laying in bed in pain with paracetamol and, other things that just didn't touch the sides in
Mm.
terms of the pain. But after that initial couple of weeks, things started to improve, and, I were making steady progress. Took it very easy. I just didn't do too much and started to pot around the house and go for little walks and things like that. And then things started to creep in, and I was struggling with like my mental health and just being cooped up. I think after, like, I was used to having some type of being at work and having some routine and things like that, and I just missed that so much. It got really difficult at that stage.
You can often lose who you are, can't you? Who am I?
Y-
Especially, and
Yeah,
I want the next bit I was going to come on to, really, I guess we can tie it all in together, is you'd just taken redundancy before all of this.
yeah,
So you've not even got a career to go back to per se that you're used
no,
to, and it's comfortable. And alongside that, I would imagine, yeah, you took redundancy, but when you're out of work and faced with an unknown period of time recovery, especially when you're starting to struggle,
yeah.
finances must start to play a part as well in terms of your thinking. How did you cope?
Yeah, the kind of financial situation was, I mean, not a huge challenge, but I'd had some redundancy payment, and that clearly took the sting out of things. But I was a little bit worried about where, how long that'd last. And when I got the um, diagnosis and after the operation. So we were on, I applied for benefits, unemployment, and I was on PIP and things like that as well. So that kind of took a little bit of the blow out of not earning as much money. But it was a quite a challenging time really, and worrying whether we got enough money or not, or would have enough money to last. And I decided to go back to work in the January 2018, and much to the dismay of my wife, she felt I wasn't ready for that. But I really needed, something. So I went back and signed on with an agency and landed a role within the NHS. So I've worked pretty solidly since then. I'm now in a permanent job, and it's been really difficult with like the chronic fatigue and things that come with post-operative. You'll know what that feels like, Steve. It's sometimes more prominent and more severe on certain days, and that can be a challenge. But I'm really well supported. I I'm lucky enough that I found a job in a palliative and end-of-life care team working for NHS England, and all the experience that I've had as a carer and also a cancer sufferer, and seeing people that I care about going through palliative and end-of-life care, I think really helped and really helps with the day job. It's a great job, it's fantastic, and yeah, I feel very lucky to be part of that, sorry. Feel very lucky to be part of that organisation, um, NHS England. We're undergoing a restructure at the moment. I'm not sure how much longer I've got left to be there, but hopefully it'll be for a while. Yeah.
Mm. Just a couple of things to come back to. I know you mentioned when your dad was going through things, you had sort of the counselling through work. Obviously, you'd been made redundant when you were diagnosed. How did you cope mentally through all that? Was there any other support available? And at what point did you find the support of Action Kidney Cancer?
Yeah, I had a bit of counselling support. I've used just my networks. Friends and family have been absolutely fantastic. Nothing majorly formal outside of the work referrals and things like that. But then I found Action Kidney Cancer as a organisation, and I think linking in with people who are like yourself who've experienced things, that's just an amazing forum to be part of. Your lived experience can really help somebody who may be just on the start of their journey and who are feeling all the things that you felt through yours, sharing that information and trying to make people understand the route and what that might mean and come up with coping mechanisms and strategies and things like that is really important. And I've really enjoyed being a part of that network online.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's you can have all the facts, figures, and information from your oncologist, your nursing team, who are brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But you can't buy lived experience and other people's knowledge of what it's really like to have a nephrectomy. I know we have a lot of sort of tips and guidance for going in and coming out from surgery, even little simple things like take a cushion for the journey home and things like that. Your doctor doesn't tell you that, but people who've been through it do, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be able to share that and make somebody's experience more positive than maybe yours was is really good. Um, I can't speak highly enough of that as an organisation. They do some
Mm.
wonderful work, and yeah, I was very lucky to find it. I think it's not always easy to navigate yourself through and find these things, but I do know the people who have signposted to it. Well, Sarah, you've had her on the podcast, and we have a connection because she went to university with my brother. And shortly after I was diagnosed, she got her diagnosis, so we helped each other along. I signposted her to Kidney Cancer Network, and the rest is history, as I say.
Yeah. Yeah, fantastic. Now it makes sense when Sarah said a friend of mine got diagnosed with it too. So yeah, I knew you
Yeah,
two were friends and things, but I didn't quite know that connection. But yeah, it's amazing how small the world is at times, isn't it, with
it is.
things
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
So it sounds like things have been quite tough since diagnosis and surgery. There's been some good things, getting back to work and things. But you've mentioned fatigue quite a lot.
Mm.
only those people who've suffered from real fatigue will understand that that's not being tired, is it? There's a real difference between fatigue and being tired.
No, it's really not, and I think, like you say, unless you've experienced it, it's really hard to explain unless you've actually felt it, and I often have to explain it to people, and, my kind of analogy is it's like walking round in waders full of water carrying an elephant. Um, it's just horrendous, and some days are worse than others. You know, some days I can function and I'm okay, and then other days I just, struggle to get out of bed and brush my teeth and have a wash in the morning. And some that is getting harder as things go on. It's not easy to get people to take it seriously either, and they often put it down to post-operative fatigue and say, "Oh, it'll go and it'll disappear." But you know as well as I do, I've done a little bit of research and I've done my own polls and things online, and it affects a lot of people. I don't know
Yeah,
whether that's the same for any cancer, but I think specifically for kidney cancer, it can be a problem for
yeah,
people who've had
absolutely.
the nephrectomies,
Yeah, absolutely.
and it
I
does get
think
challenging.
it does, and obviously we have to remember, don't we, that the job of the kidney is to flush out, so we need to keep hydrated as kidney cancer patients, and lack of
Yeah,
hydration causes fatigue, causes the same sort of thing, so it's a vicious circle, and if
yeah.
you've only got one kidney, your other one's working harder, isn't it?
Yeah, you just have to make sure that you look after yourself. I mean, probably prior to having the kidney cancer, I didn't drink enough water and I don't drink alcohol very often anymore. I tend to, try to eat healthily and I do a bit of exercise, and it just puts a whole different perspective on your life. And it hasn't ruined my life, though. I always say kidney cancer has probably been one of the best things that happened to me. And I know that sounds absolutely ridiculous, but it's changed my life in so many positive ways. Um, I've done much more than I probably would have done. We don't, you know, we don't sit back and not do anything. We've had some amazing family holidays, and we've been to, we've done the Florida Disney Universal. We went to do a East Coast tour just after COVID. We've been to Mexico, and life's too short. And I think it gives you a whole different perspective on life. And, you
You're
know,
dead right. You're dead
it's
right,
just,
Richard. I've said on this podcast before, very similar to that. It's changed my life, and a lot of people think you're a bit crazy, saying, "What you mean? You're glad you had cancer?" Well, of course I'm not, and I'd never want it again. But it does put
no,
a different spin on things, doesn't it? And it does. Life does change. I mean, you know my story, but I could have been still stuck in a job answering the phone 24
mhm,
hours a day about stuff that is not important in life. Now I get to do things
yeah.
I'm really passionate about and enjoy, because you think, actually, you do only have one shot at this life. So do something that actually you enjoy and you're passionate about.
Absolutely. I always say if I hadn't taken the redundancy and finished work, I wouldn't be here. I know I wouldn't. I'd have just ignored the warning signs. I'd have put them down to work related stress. I probably wouldn't have made time to go to the GP, and it could have been a very different outcome. And I count myself lucky that I got that opportunity to leave work and to take care of myself. It was really important. Because of the family history, obviously, I'm having regular checkups anyway, but I've also undergone some genetic testing because I'm an identical twin. There's a bit of concern that there might be an inherited gene, and they've checked everything and they can't find anything at the moment. That's not to say that, with the impact of new kind of checks and that they're not going to find something. So there is an opportunity for my family to be checked annually from a certain age, and, the ultrasounded just to double check that the kidneys are okay. I'm going to need to talk to, my kids about that as they get a bit older. But there's no current scientific link, and they'll just periodically review me, and we'll wait and see what happens. But yeah, I think that's a real positive thing because it might just cut the chance of my kids or any of my family
Oh.
going through what I went through because it'll be found early.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I really hope they keep a close eye on you because it's uncanny, isn't it, that you get it after your dad had it, and you just never know.
Yeah,
You never know, and I know tests might say not necessarily, but yes, considering the diagnosis rate of kidney cancer is not massively high. It's getting higher, obviously, as we know. To have father and son diagnosed is quite surreal, really. So what's next for you, Richard? You say restructure at work, but what's next for you going forward in life?
I don't know really. I'm in the middle of deciding really what next. Hopefully, I'll be able to continue working for a while. There is the opportunity that, excuse me, I can take redundancy from NHS England before they disband. But I think, you know, for me personally, taking work outside of that to consider, just more of the same. We intend to do much more travelling. I have a very, very unhealthy obsession with car restoration now after doing the Cortina, and I've got way too many projects. I'm always tinkering in the garage when I've got time. I'm just about to get another car back from the painters next week, so my summer's going to be busy this year, I think. And then doing a bit more volunteering work. That's some of the other things that I've been involved in after the cancer. So I wanted to challenge myself, and I've got involved in a business group, and I set that up in my local town, and we liaise with the local authority and other business and other community groups to try and make a difference in the town. And that's a really, really rewarding thing that I enjoy doing. So more of that.
Fantastic.
And
I
yeah,
mean,
I don't sit still, Steve. I'm always busy.
I mean, fantastic. I mean, just before we come towards a close, what would your message be for anybody listening, following what you've been through, especially anybody who might be recently diagnosed or thinking, oh my word, there's something might not be quite right here?
Try not to panic. You've always got options, and just take a bit of time to steady yourself before making any major decisions. But I think, post that is just live life to the full and do what you can. Be mindful of looking after yourself. Listen to your body. I'm so much more in tune with myself now than I ever was. If I get an inkling that something doesn't feel right, I don't ignore it anymore. I go to the doctors, and
Mm,
I get seen. Don't ignore any warning signs. Take it seriously, because the sooner they can catch something, the better chance you have of survival. If it is, cancer.
yeah, great advice. Richard, thank you so much for your time today. And I'm sure our listeners will be inspired with what you've both been through, both with your own cancer journey and how much loss you've had through this awful, awful disease. I want to say thank you again for our sponsors, Corporate Wellbeing Solutions. And I also want to ask for some help from you guys who are listening to this podcast. I would like a little favor. Could you please leave a review of the podcast if you're enjoying it, on whichever platform you get it from? It helps raise profile and enables more people to be interested in joining as a guest. If you want more information on the services I provide, such as counselling and public speaking, please visit my website on www.stevepoyntoncounsellinandsupport.co.uk. And I'd also like to hear from you. Which subjects would you like to hear about? What have your struggles been, and whether that as a patient or as a carer, or in Richard's case and Charlotte's case, who we've had on before? Please reach out on info@Steve Poynton Counselling and Support. But that brings to the end today's episode. Thank you again, Richard, and I will speak to you all soon.